So we're leaving protists behind now. We've got this sort of basal form of eukaryotic organisms that are central to, or that are basal to fungus, plants, and animals. And they've got their own unique stuff like slime molds and everything doing their own thing. Now we're going to move into the larger groups, the more complex multicellular groups, starting off with fungus. Then we're going to talk a bit about simple plants, then more complex plants, then we'll talk about animals, and then we'll specifically talk about you. Throughout human history, fungus have had an enormous impact on our lives and our culture. From the earliest human civilizations, fungi were important. They let you live. We didn't know everything that we know about them now. We just knew practically what it was. And one of the most important human discoveries of all time was beer. I kid you not, the fermentation of alcohol is what allowed our civilization to get off the ground. And it's not because it inhibits our we have lower inhibitions and do stupider things. It's because alcohol allowed us to survive in situations where we otherwise. The big reason is alcohol was safer to drink than water. And that sounds weird. But if you can think of cradle of civilization, you've got these rivers, the Nile, what are the two rivers? The Tigris and the Euphrates, both of which are flowing in nice, warm areas that allow for lots of protist growth, lots of bacteria growth. It was not clean water. You didn't have a filter for it. You're drinking water direct from a stream. It was a lot of opportunity for waterborne illness, and we were very susceptible to it. One of the most common ways to die back in ancient civilization, up through about 200 years ago, was diarrhea from microorganisms. You were losing more water than you could take in, you dehydrate, and you die. If you look at the monarchies in Europe, you'll find that the end of several kings' lives were on the toilet. They could not survive. Now the thing is, once we figured out to make beer, not drink water directly out of the stream, you end up finding that beer, because of the alcohol, kills bacteria. So I'm not talking drinking a straight up, hardcore beer, just a watered down beer was better for you than water. I was on an Alaskan cruise with my parents, which was a mistake, but I was on an Alaskan cruise with my parents a few years ago. And my mom was marveling at how clear the water was coming off the mountain. And she's like, I could just have a cool sip of that. And the guide was like, no! That water that's coming out that mountain spring is flowing over leaves, and it's flowing through, animals defecate in it. All sorts of things are happening with that water that you want to drink right now. It may look clear, but it is not clear. There is plenty of stuff in there that will kill you, but not beer. You can trust it. Fun story, speaking of monarchs, Henry and the elephant. Henry I of England was given an elephant by the King of France because, when you're monarchs, you do that sort of thing. Gave him an elephant and said, this elephant is for you. We should have peace. Have you guys ever heard of the Tower of London? Do you know the Tower of London, while it was a fortress, and I think it became most well known for that's where prisoners go, is that probably how you guys know it, was originally a menagerie. It's a zoo. It's where the king kept all his exotic animals. There were polar bears living in the moats, things like that. It was crazy. So he put his elephant in there. And there are records, historic records. Somebody had to write this down, that instead of feeding the elephant water from the Thames, because people knew drinking water from the river was bad, they fed the elephants 12 gallons of beer a day. So here you got a drunk elephant wandering around London. And I just think that's hilarious, because I can just imagine him just like staggering about, sitting on carts, things like that. King's elephant, you can't do much about it. The other very important thing that fungus helped us with was bread. Yeast is a type of fungus. It allowed us to move from very simple paste-like bread patties, think flat, very, very flat breads, to much fuller breads that were fully baked and would last longer. So you could go on a longer trek. You take your bread with you and it survives. You guys know bread will live for a few days. It goes stale, but you can still eat it. You still get nutrients from it. It's an easy way of getting carbohydrates that we needed to survive. So between bread and beer, I mean, we're set. Fungus also had a few other impacts on us. Fungus kind of messed us up when it came to the Salem witch trials. Basically, in America, in Salem, people went nuts for a few years. They just started accusing everybody of witchcraft. And the reasoning behind it, we think now, is due to a fungus infestation. Well, that and, the patriarchy didn't like uppity women. That was another big thing going on then. And now. But the big thing was that ergot secreted what's called aflatoxins. And these aflatoxins are hallucinogenic. So if people were eating aflatoxins because their grains were infested with fungus, they would start to hallucinate. They'd start feeling things crawling all over them. They thought, people were accused of sending, spiders on their skin. Basically, people were having really bad trips and blaming local women on it. So there we go. People have used fungus for pest control. One of the earliest forms of pest control was to sprinkle fungus onto a foraging insect. Basically, you'd sprinkle a fungus onto an insect like a cockroach, and it would take that fungus back to the hive, and then it would feed this poisonous fungus to the queen, who would then die. It's what a lot of our modern pest insecticides are based on. Leafcutter ants use fungus in order to eat, just like we do. These leafcutter ants don't actually eat the leaves. The reason they cut leaves is in order to, they take the leaf, they take it back to their colony, they throw it on a big pile of fungus, and the fungus devours the leaf, and then the ants eat the fungus. Very industrial. We think that fungus are linked to the bee disappearance. You guys know bees are sort of getting harder and harder to find. Excuse me. That's not good for us because we use bees to pollinate so many of our crops. A new type of fungus that's being carried by a mite seems to have an effect on this. And also, don't get me wrong, insecticides are absolutely killing bees. But there's also a new type of fungus that lives on a tiny, tiny mite that jumps from one bee to the next. That fungus is killing the bees as well. It's causing colony collapse. So basically everything in the colony dies. Fungus and plants, they have developed a very mutually beneficial relationship. These fungus and the plants support each other. They're symbiotic. They can work with each other in order to deliver nutrients from one place to the next. There's a relationship between the Hyphaea fungus, so the long, stringy bodies, and the roots of plants. So you can see here the root of the plant and all these very, very, very thin little pieces coming off that are fungus. That fungus is not eating the plant. It's actually helping the plant. We have two ways that fungus and plants can interact. They could be Endomycorrhizae or Ectomycorrhizae. Endomycorrhizae, they're going to be these long filaments of the fungus that penetrate inside of the cell wall of the plant. You can see the Endomycorrhizae growing inside the plant cell here. What they're doing is they might be taking sugar from the plant and delivering toxins that the plant can use to defend itself. These relationships that they have allow for plants to, one, get some nutrients, get some secondary metabolites they wouldn't otherwise be able to make, get some poisons and things. They also allow plants to extend their root network. What do roots do for plants? Do you guys know? They're like veins, right? So they're going to they're going to move nutrients from one place to the next. In this case, they're pulling water out of the soil. If you have lots and lots of fungus that are associated with the plant, the fungus can increase the surface area that those roots touch, allowing the plant to uptake more water. The plant gets more water and more minerals, can grow better, and the fungus can take some of the sugar from the plant. It's sort of it's beneficial for both. Ectomycorrhizae are the hyphae that are going to grow on the outside of the cell walls. So they're not directly in the cell wall, they're just delivering up into the plant, between the cell walls. And that's usually what you're going to see interacting with roots. So plants and fungus can have mutually beneficial relationships, symbiotic relationships, where the fungus will supply a larger surface area to draw in more nutrients and water to the plant, and the plant will provide the fungus with sugar. Now, sometimes you'll have fungus growing entirely within the plant, so it's not interacting with the environment at all. These type of fungus are called endophytes. They live within the tissues and leaves of the plant, so they're actually inside the plant, not extending out into the environment. They're going to do a few things that are kind of interesting. They're going to secrete toxins. Those toxins don't hurt the plant, they hurt animals that are trying to eat the plant. So as soon as the plant begins to get damaged by say an herbivore, it will begin to produce a poison that will cause the herbivore pain or death. It's why many types of browsing herbivores like deer will only eat a plant a little bit. They don't eat all of it all the way down, because they stay there just long enough for that toxin production to begin, and then they go on to the next plant. They also will allow they provide the plant with some of the enzymes they need to really break down some of the material in their environment. What you're seeing on this picture is an example of switchgrass that have no endophytes and some that have endophytes, and you can see a big difference. Those endophytes can help pull in nutrients from the environment. We also have some more formalized relationships between plants and fungi, in which they cannot exist without the other, and that's where we get the lichens. Lichens are these, the scaly growths you see growing on trees. They're not moss, they're a lichen for the most part. Lichens are a combination of algae and fungus. The fungus is going to produce carbon dioxide and water from cellular respiration. The algae produces oxygen and glucose. So literally, they're just sending food and nutrients back and forth to each other. These lichens were going to be crucial for building our original soils. They were a food source in scarce times. They are soil builders, and they do air monitoring. I have a picture of a reindeer up here. Reindeers, one of their primary food sources is actually lichens. I don't know, you guys were kids at some point. Did you ever put out like reindeer carrots for the reindeers at Christmas? Yeah. So my kids don't do that, because I'm a biologist. Go find some lichens, because that's what reindeer eat. They're not going to go up to the North Pole and eat carrots. Seriously. So reindeer, when there's no food available, especially during winter, will actually dig up snow in order to get to the lichen underneath. That's their primary food source. You can see here a bunch of, these are Dahl's goats, eating the lichens that grow on the side of a mountain, because other plants can't grow on rocks. Where you have rocks, you generally don't have plants unless there's soil underneath those rocks. So these lichens give heterotrophs a source of carbon. Lichen, again, like I said, are soil builders. Lichens will, they get on rocks, they secrete slight acids, so they're breaking the rock down. The fungus is providing the plant carbon dioxide and water. The plant is providing glucose and oxygen for the fungus. So they work together. It was lichens that were the first organism out on land. I know we always talk about bugs and things coming out of the water first, but lichens were the first, because what lichens did once they got on land and supported each other was break the rock down into soil, which will then provide the substrate in which other plants can grow. Also act as monitors. They're very responsive to sulfur dioxide, which is a major air pollutant. It's especially common around volcanoes, but if there's sulfur dioxide present, you will not find lichens. If by chance you notice the lichens on the trees around your house change colors, it's time to move. It's for air monitoring, because that means that the air around your house is getting toxic chemicals in it.